In this episode, we talk about the great thing that Donald Trump did, and we talk about Larry Gaines. Welcome to the DO Boxing Show. I'm your host, Dameon Okposio. Thanks for tuning into this episode. In this episode, I was saying that I want to talk about the great thing that Donald Trump did, and then we're going to talk about Larry Gaines and who Larry Gaines is. So if you're watching this show for the first time and maybe you don't know who I am, my name is Dameon Okposio. And basically, I run Below the Belt Boxing Magazine. I own it and run it, and I run the Ontario Boxing Hall of Fame. And I'm just an all-around big fan and business person in the world of boxing, especially Canadian boxing. When it comes to Donald Trump, and recently he had pardoned Jack Johnson, it was a monumental event. And you know what, there's a little bit of controversy around it because of how people feel so strongly about Donald Trump. But this is one of the things that I felt compelled to kind of do a video about because I really wanted to talk about it. Now, when it comes to Jack Johnson and the figure that he was in boxing, he's considered one of the all-time great heavyweight boxers in the sport of boxing. And what was so controversial about him was the fact that he was an African-American boxer in a time where there was a lot of racial strife in the United States. Jack Johnson was born on March 31st, 1878 in Galveston, Texas. And he was the first African-American world heavyweight champion. He had done a lot of tremendous things during the time of his reign, including outside of the ring. He was a very flamboyant guy. He upset the establishment. He didn't have, like in an interview with Muhammad Ali, he didn't have the Nation of Islam protecting him or different people protecting him, and he did a lot of things that were considered taboo at that time, like an African-American marrying a white woman, and he married two white women, and he was very outgoing and flamboyant in a time where, it was very dangerous to be an African-American in the United States. Now, in 1903, it was one of the first titles that Jack Johnson won was actually the World Colored Heavyweight Championship. And this was an actual championship for black fighters, but they could be considered the World Colored Heavyweight champion even if they fought other fighters who were not black. He won that title February 5th, 1903 by a 20-round decision over a guy named Denver Ed Morton, who was 15-1-1 at the time, and he fought him in Hazard's Pavilion in Los Angeles. Jack Johnson actually won the World Heavyweight title by beating Tommy Burns on December 26th, the day after Christmas, in 1908, and he beat him in Sydney, Australia, for the World Heavyweight title. Tommy Burns was inducted into the Ontario Boxing Hall of Fame in 2016, representing Hanover, Ontario. So Tommy Burns has a background being from Hanover, Ontario, and another famous Canadian boxer. When I'm saying another famous Canadian boxer, because I'm referencing him to Larry Gaines, who we're going to be talking about as well. In 1912, Jack Johnson was arrested on charges of violating the Mann Act, and this is where the pardon is in relation to, because they had developed this law basically saying that you couldn't transfer a woman from one state to another for immoral purposes, and they kind of stretched the meaning of that to include African Americans marrying white women and taking them across state lines, and that's what Jack Johnson was convicted of. So basically, that's where the pardon stems. But I'm going to give you a little bit more information on Jack Johnson as well. And so in 1915, Jack Johnson lost his heavyweight title in what some consider a very controversial fight. There's a lot of speculation that Jack Johnson may have actually thrown the fight. that he fought, and it was against Jess Willard. So it was in 1915. He lost to Jess Willard by KO in the 26th round of a scheduled 45-round fight, and that was actually in Cuba. And then Jack Johnson went on to win numerous fights right after the Jess Willard fight, and then he started accumulating some losses near the end of his career. He retired in 1931 from professional boxing with an impressive career record of 56 wins, 11 losses, and 8 draws as a professional with 35 knockouts. And then he died in 1946 at the age of 68 years old. Now, when it comes to the pardoning by Donald Trump, and what makes it a significant thing is that so many people had been calling for the pardon to take place years before. It was during the Bush administration in 2008, the House passed a bill, and that bill failed to pass the Senate. So the House agreed that, Jack Johnson should receive a posthumous pardon, but it didn't pass the Senate. And then when Obama took office in 2009, Senator John McCain, representative of the House Peter King, and filmmaker Ken Burns, and the great grandniece of Jack Johnson, Linda Hayward, all requested a posthumous pardon for Jack Johnson to President Obama, and President Obama did not give the pardon. In July 2009, Congress passed a resolution asking for a posthumous pardon of Jack Johnson. Again, President Obama declined at that time. December 2015, Congress expressed that he should receive a posthumous pardon. Again, Barack Obama declined at that time, and in 2016, a petition was put forth by Senator John McCain, Senator Harry Reid, Congressman Gregory Meeks, because it was the 70th anniversary of Jack Johnson's death. So they wanted to commemorate it with a posthumous pardon, and President Obama was in office at that time, and he declined to pardon Jack Johnson at that time. So what makes this significant is that on April 18th, 2018, President Trump decided that he was going to give Jack Johnson a pardon. He announced that he was considering it. And he had spoken with Sylvester Stallone, and as soon as May 24th, 2018, the pardon had actually passed. And it was a significant time. They had the current heavyweight champion, Deontay Wilder, there. And, that some people may debate that and say, well, Joshua Wilder's also a heavyweight champion. True enough. But Deontay Wilder is at least the WBC undefeated heavyweight champion. He was there on hand, as well as one of the most decorated heavyweight champions. The last unified heavyweight champion, Lennox Lewis, was also on hand in the office of the U.S. President Donald Trump, and as well as the great grandniece for the posthumous pardon of Jack Johnson. A monumental day, and a great thing that Donald Trump did. In addition to that, what I wanted to add to that was we also have a great part of Canadian history and Ontario history involved in that, because at a time where a lot of professional fighters did not want to fight black fighters, Tommy Burns, who was a Canadian from Ontario, who was the world heavyweight champion at that time, took on the challenge and said, yeah, absolutely, I'll fight Jack Johnson, which was a very courageous thing for him to do at that time. And it was monumental in Canadian history as well. Tommy Burns ended up losing, and that's how Jack Johnson became the world heavyweight champion. And then after Jack Johnson became heavyweight champion and then lost to Jess Willard, people went through a lot of, took a lot of steps to make sure that African American males could not win the heavyweight championship, which was the most coveted title in sports during that time. So along comes the Toronto Terror, born in Toronto, Larry Gaines, who was an awesome heavyweight from that time, right from the Toronto area. He turned professional in 1923. That's when he started boxing. He made his debut on June 23rd, 1923. So when Larry Gaines from Toronto turned professional, his debut fight, they said, guess who you're going to be fighting? A gentleman by the name of Frank Moody, whose record was 79 wins, 33 losses, 11 draws. So Larry Gaines fought him, and as you may imagine, he actually lost that fight. He lost by technical knockout in the 5th round, but he continued to fight, and he had a lot of success. He ended up winning, and you know what? He had some losses along the way, but I think it was in an era where you fought who they put in front of you. In 1925, August 28th, 1925, Larry Gaines beat a young Max Schmeling, who was 14-2-2 at the time. So 14 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws. And Larry Gaines did that by going to Cologne, Germany, and knocking out Max Schmeling in the 2nd round. In 1927, Larry Gaines beat Soldier Jones in Canada for the Canadian heavyweight title. In 1931, Larry Gaines went to the Commonwealth to win the Commonwealth title by beating Phil Scott, who was 65 wins, 12 losses, and 4 draws at that time. And in 1932, Larry Gaines beat Primo Carnera, who was a towering heavyweight fighter at that time, whose record at that time was 57 wins against 4 losses. And at 6'5", Primo Carnera was one of the tallest heavyweights back then. And Larry Gaines beat him over points. And then in 1942, Larry Gaines retired with an impressive record of 117 wins against 22 losses and 5 draws with 63 knockouts. So he had more knockouts than a lot of guys had fights. If you're interested in finding out more about Larry Gaines, there is a book that he has called The Impossible Dream. He became really good friends with Max Schmeling after their fight, and I believe that Max Schmeling was one of the people that helped him be able to write his story. He moved, Larry Gaines moved with his family to Europe in the latter part of his life. And I just received this book in the mail, actually. It was ordered, so I haven't had an opportunity to get past half of the first chapter, but it's a compelling read, and I'm looking forward to it. I may make another video after I actually go through the book and read the book. But Larry Gaines is actually going to be heading the 2019 Ontario Boxing Hall of Fame induction class. It's going to be the biggest induction class that we've had so far. So we started our inductions in 2016, and we've had 3 classes of 11 inductees each, leading up to 2018. And now going into 2019, we've increased the class to 15 inductees, one of which is going to be Larry Gaines. And then we're going to release who the other 14 are on September 1st, 2018. We'll be letting everybody know, and then tickets will be on sale at that time. The induction is going to be taking place in Woodstock, Ontario, at a larger venue than we had this year. And we're planning on doing the biggest boxing trade show on that date as well, which is going to be Saturday, May the 11th, 2019. And so mark your calendars, because it's going to be a really, really fun event and a monumental event where we get to honor and induct a great champion like Larry Gaines, and we get to recognize the accomplishments of the other inductees and celebrate in what they've done. Thanks so much for listening to this video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about number 1, Jack Johnson, number 2, the importance of what happened with Donald Trump when he provided the pardon, and number 3, about another Canadian great from Ontario, Larry Gaines. We'll see you at the induction ceremony that's going to be taking place on May the 11th, 2019. And remember, you can contact us anytime if you have any questions related to boxing by sending us a message through Twitter at DOKPOSIO, through email okposio@hotmail.com, and don't forget to subscribe to get every episode of the DO Boxing Show. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.